Welcome to everybody to our fourth round, actually talking about the CHRO in the new normal. My name is Jens Müller-Oerlinghausen. I'm one of the founding partners of undconsorten 15 years ago. We are now for the third time hidden champion for leadership in organization, and we support many CHROs in their strategic issues. And so it was completely clear that we wanted to understand also that new normal for the CHRO better. And therefore, we have set up this interview series with the BPM, one of the two German associations for HR managers. Today is the fourth round, a very interesting discussions which we had so far. And now we decided to take it on a Swiss focus for today and have invited three great CHROs from Switzerland. Today's panelists have both business and HR, I think, experience. They are at the heart, as we will see, of the COVID-19 action, and we will certainly have a lot, I think, to discuss about that new normal. We have Barth. Kellen is CHRO at Lonza since May 2020, pharmaceutical company which is also involved in the production of one of the COVID-19 vaccines. She has been working for many years in the pharmaceutical industry with an international career spanning 20 years of driving change and growth at Novartis and Cisco in commercial, manufacturing, and IT operations. Christina Trelle is head of HR for Swiss International Airlines since March, but knew her team, as we found out, since a couple of years, which made onboarding a little bit easier than for Kellen. She's an airline child, if I might say so, and started her career at Lufthansa 14 years ago. And of course, Christina manages the crisis in one of the probably most effective industries. And we are curious, but also sympathetic, I think, to hear more about these experiences. Werner is Chief Personnel Officer at Swisscom since 2011. Before that, Hans worked in leading HR positions for almost 10 years at Swiss Re, for a couple of years before that at Schindler. He will be moving on next year, so we are lucky to have you here and hear your thoughts leaving the CHRO. And we know Hans as one CHRO which is going to say the truth and what he thinks. So this is going to be, I think, good for us. And we bring together here very different perspectives, three completely different industry, and therefore also three companies totally differently, I think, affected by the crisis. So it should be an exciting and interesting ride. Thank you again for taking the time and for discussing, I think, your experiences with us. So what do we plan, I think, to do? If we look at, I think, a very rough agenda, we would like to look back a little bit and evaluate and assess the actual situation of course, the second lockdown we all are in, but also of the outlook, I think, of vaccine next year, this year. We then, I think, and that's more the deep dive, which we like to do, is what do we expect as changes in that new normal, which might be new normal, accelerated normal, and old normal. We come to that, I think, in a second. And then we take it to the role of the CHRO and the role of HR in that, I think, describe new normal. And of course, that is a new normal under a lot of uncertainty as we look into the crystal ball together. How will this all work technically? We are in two different Microsoft Teams calls. I think we are here in a typical Microsoft Teams calls as we all know it. You as participants are in a live event, which has a slight, I think, a time lag. You find a Q&A function, usually should be in the lower right corner. Questions can be liked, and please, I think, post questions, like them, so we know, I think, what you have on your mind and what you would like us, I think, also to answer. And please feel free to ask questions all the time, even if we cannot probably manage all the questions in the 1 hour, 50 minutes. At the same time, we will conduct, I think, 2 or 3 surveys. There is a Mentimeter, is a good survey, I think, tool, which you probably all know by now. Have a second device ready, usually the mobile device. And I think you can either just like scan the QR code or you can input, I think, the code as you see it below. And we will start with a little test survey as we, I think, the 3 of us go into the, I think, first topic. And the first topic is, how has the role of the CHRO and HR changed in the last month? So, Christina, how would you describe your role in the last 6 months?
Well, that's a challenging question actually, because I mean I stepped into that role when the crisis began, and for Swiss the world changed like that. I think for a lot of other companies too, because I mean the health of the people was affected, but for us there was a complete shift of all the things that we were looking at before, talent, trying to get better at diversity. At the moment, we're looking at costs and looking on how can we shape ourselves in order to this crisis. So my role is involved with a lot of union negotiation, with a lot of cost-cutting programs, and trying to still keep people motivated and on board.
Tough. And what do you do to keep them actually motivated? Just like to ask me that little question as well.
Oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, because that is really it's a difficult question. And I think my answer is that this is not the role of HR. Actually, I don't see that we can motivate people. I think that's the role of teams itself, the role of the leadership team, and we can support them. And of course, we try and provide the people. Like for example, we're at the moment we're going to enter, for us, the so-called winter mode, which is a mode of like reduced activity, even more reduced activity, unfortunately. And we've signed up with a virtual language learning company, so we can provide that at least for our people. But it's tough. It's tough.
Thank you. Kelvin, I think we know you had your onboarding during, I think, COVID-19. Would you like to share some of, I think, this experience, but also your lessons learned? Because I think we are looking at digital onboarding, I think all of us in the next, I think, months still, maybe it's still to stay, actually, with digital recruiting taking place, and maybe digital onboarding becomes like more of a normal reality.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, I started in May into a new company. So Christina also started at a similar time, but at least you had the benefit, maybe and maybe not, of knowing your way around. I still to this date haven't met some of my team. So that in itself is just different. So who knows when that will be. But I think what my lessons learned were, and I had to learn them very quickly, is when I was onboarding, it was virtual. So I was sitting at home in a home office I actually didn't have, that I quickly, well, my husband actually made for me. So I was sitting, there trying to connect. So what I learned was quickly, you have to lean in. You have to really, I wouldn't say force yourself, but there's a lot of pushing yourself into areas you wouldn't normally go, because you have to be present. And how do you be present when you're not physically present or you don't know the people? So I found myself, especially more with the business rather than HR, was just sort of saying, oh, I'm coming to that meeting. Oh, I heard your meeting. And I'm just leaning in and pushing myself into maybe where it made sense, maybe it didn't, just to find out. And I think what I learned quite quickly is you find the boundaries quicker that way, which is a very nice cultural onboarding, because maybe things that I tried to penetrate into where HR wasn't used to being there, I found out very quickly. So there's positives to it as well. And I'd say another thing was around feedback. I had to constantly ask for feedback, which of course we should be doing all the time, but maybe we don't. But I had to, because I wasn't getting it. You don't get enough feedback through this vehicle. So I actually found myself at the end of most meetings, especially at the beginning, by saying, what can I do more of? What can I do less of? How's it going? Because I just didn't know. I wasn't picking up the corridor. I wasn't picking up, the body language. So I just found it was that pushing myself in, leaning in more, but always asking for feedback. So it sounds like stuff we should be doing, but I had to up it.
Very interesting. So are you going to keep this, I think, or these two, I think, new habits when you come back from the digital to an analog world? leaning in, pushing for the boundary and asking actually more for the feedback, even if you can read the body language again? What do you think?
Well, I would be fool not to, right? I would be a terrible CHRO if I would say, no, I have enough feedback now. We're not going to do that. So of course is the answer. But there's going to have to be a new habit change, because I need to do it now. Whereas when in the office, you might forget that. So I think it's less about, of course I intend to do it, but how am I going to ritualize it and really make sure it becomes a habit? So intention is there, the proof will be in the pudding.
Thanks a lot. Hans, please.
Can I jump in, because I think
so.
I just realized that I think I came across like very negative, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands that, of course, also for us, this crisis has got some, especially within HR, very positive aspects. I mean, we are so close to the business. We've never been so close to the business before. It's extremely exciting, not only for HR, but also for a lot of other departments and people in the company. The problem is that there is a huge divide. We have a lot of people who don't work, and we have a lot of people who have really, really exciting projects. And all of us have a very unsecure business outlook, which makes it hard. I just wanted to say it's not all bad. It's an exciting time as well.
Absolutely. I think this is a very good statement, because at the end, I think when we look back, actually, here's already the Christmas decoration, I think, and when we talked about season's greetings and so on, when you look back into this year, I think there is a temptation to negate it and to say like it's all negative, but in the end I think it's also the optimistic, I think, spirit which takes the positive side, out of this year. But Hans, I wanted to ask you, I think we are of course in the middle of a second lockdown. We come back to the negative side again. So how did you actually at Swisscom react to it? What did you do?
Yeah, more or less we did what we did throughout the year. It was following the numbers and react on the numbers. I think it wasn't that special. We didn't have a specific lockdown. Of course, we told people stay at home again, much more than before in summer times. But it's and this will go on. It's kind of the mode we are in now. From time to time, we tell them please stay at home, and then when it gets better, probably we tell them why you don't come back a bit to see each other, to have that part of body language which Caroline you mentioned. It's the mode we're in now. Yes, that wasn't perceived as a specific wave, I would say.
Yeah. You mentioned numbers. Let's have a look at, I think, numbers, and as they shifted, I think, not just like from month to month, but, also from quarter to quarter. And you remember, I think, the very pessimistic forecast, I think, in March, April, I think, when, of course, stock exchanges actually really tanked. And the forecast was -6, I think in some countries -10%, I think, really recession. I think this has shifted over the more positive, I think, third quarter, when I think forecast became a little bit more optimistic again, with more like basically a downturn of -3, -4%. And then now with the second lockdown, of course, numbers get, I think, a little bit more pessimistic, I think, again. And similarly mirroring, I think, is of course the forecast for 21, where there was more of a rebound, I think, effect forecasted, and now it's still, I think, a very healthy, I think, growth if you think of normal growth rates, I think, in our countries. And then at the same time, I think unemployment rate really, I think, goes up. I think it's not just like, 1 or 2 percentage points. It's quite a bit if you come, of course, from a low, I think, 2.5 or 2 percentage points. So when you look at these figures, Caroline, would you expect a certain easing, I think, on the employment side, where I think our past, at least, our past normal was characterized by shortage of talent and shortage, I think, of employees if we wanted to hire?
Yeah, I mean, specific to Lonza, I won't talk about the macro, but we are in a growth phase. As you mentioned at the start out, we are helping one of the the lead producers of a vaccine, we're going to be producing their drug substance for them. And because of that, of course, we need to be making 1 billion doses a year. And that's just part of our business, right? So we're in that, that small population of organizations who are actually growing. So we're looking for thousands of people, and we're looking for specific skills, and we're looking for specific locations. So we're growing, so that's a good thing. But of course, we have to find the right talent, which is always a challenge. But so far, we're able to do it. So again, we're in a different situation to maybe some of the other areas like Swiss. But because we make things beyond, I say, the vaccine is one area, but we make drug substance for many companies. We also make specialty ingredients for disinfectants. So as you can see, it's a company that at the moment is needed, and we're stepping up to that.
Of course, I think if we hear this positive side, Christina, I think, of course, we wonder about the airline industry. What's the internal, I think, expectation? When is Swiss back, I think, to pre-crisis levels?
Actually, our outlook also changes, like everything changes in this crisis. We were hoping to be quite more advanced by now than we are. I mean, we really did have a setback with that second wave around the world. So we're serving like around 10% of what we would usually do. Mm-hmm. Our hope actually lies with companies like Lonza, as well as also political developments that will help us make travel more easy. I don't think it will be the same as it was before. I think it will take quite some time. The same with business travel, as we've said before. Digitalization and virtual meetings. We've all realized that it works. I think there will still be an urge of people to meet, read body language, or just meet. But this will change also if we do have a downturn in the economy, people don't want to spend as much money travel. So it'll take quite a while. There's different forecasts, some talking about 23, others about 24. I think it all depends highly on how the next half year develops and travel up.
Right. Thank you. We have one question, I think, which I think is interesting to all of you, which is like, what has been the most, or what have been the most valuable tool, I think, in your and for yourself, I think, in your leadership role during the crisis? So, any reaction, Hans? I think.
I don't know if the question goes to a specific tool. I know the quote, "A fool with a tool is still a fool." So, what shall I say? I think in a stressful year like this one, it's I guess extremely important to stay focused, because you could do and take so many actions and start so many sub projects, and I think it's extremely important to stay focused and stay with the major topics, and also dare to say no to certain things. So. Not a specific tool in mind, but just the focus is important. And yet, if you just allow me to the charts you have seen shown.
Please.
I have some clear question marks, and Caroline, you can tell much more about that. All these scenarios go in a direction that as of 22, everything is normal again, and there is no COVID-22 or COVID-23. We just are then back to normal life, because vaccination is so good that everybody is healthy at the end. But what I understand at the moment is that vaccination helps you a few months. And even if you have that vaccination, you can still be affected, but you don't have the symptoms, but you can affect other people. So I don't know if these scenarios are realistic. And if this is also just good hope, and we're spending money now, and maybe the next wave will be in 22, 23, And it would be interesting to see how we react on that.
Yeah. Interesting discussion, I think, of course. I mean, there are, of course, 100 of vaccination scenarios out for each country. I just read recently one about the US with herd immunity being reached earliest, I think, Q4 2021. But only, and that was an interesting, I think, I think it was like little asterisks, but only if the vaccines are, I think, applicable to children as well. And if not, I think, unfortunately, then I think we need even more. I think we need more, I think, vaccination to reach that herd immunity. I mean, in the end, what are your thoughts about it? Will we see? I think this was just an economic forecast, and I think economic rebound effects are just like typical after recessions. We have seen them basically throughout, I think, recessions. That doesn't, I think, say that we won't wear masks and don't have, I think, lockdowns or whatever, I think, in the next year. So do you expect basically the current lockdown regime, I think, to continue throughout the next year?
I mean, just a view on that, I don't want to talk about the science because I'm not well placed to do that, but what I would say, bringing it back to the HR skills, is agility. Right? It's about, we've got to deal with what's in front of us. And if one thing this pandemic has taught us, it's that. You have to live for the moment. Of course, you've got to have your, an airplane? I can hear something.
Now it's gone again.
Okay, I thought Swiss were back up and running.
There's a strong background noise. I think maybe
a train is running through your office.
Now it's better.
It's a plane from Swiss, but
oh, unfortunately not. Unfortunately not.
No, but agility. I think really it is about agility. It's we have to deal with what's in front of us, and I think what we've learned from this is that we're able to do that. So I think it's about learning fast. Just being very clear about failure is fantastic because we're learning, but learning fast, moving forward, experimenting everywhere, and then just having this environment and trying to bring a bit of fun into it, if that's the right word, of it's okay to fail because we're just learning it on the fly. And I think rather than saying, well, when we get the vaccine, we're going to be cured and back to normal, that's not how it's going to be. And I'm not here to predict the future, but I just don't think we know, and we don't know when. And to put our lives on hold until a date scares me, just for humanity. It's like, we're living every day with what we've got. And I think this is where the function thrives. It's that agility, experimentation. And if we bring that to the workplace with a little bit of joy and humor, I think we can make great traction as the function.
So I was just bringing that in because it's all about the discussion about the new normal. And I'm always challenging a bit, what is new on that normal? Wasn't that the normal also before? Because we all were in competition and had to do our very best. Had to scale up people, had to let go people, had to do everything it needed for the transformation. Now, of course, there's an acceleration in various topics, and it was a very stressful year. And it's a privilege also to work in an industry like IT and ICT, of course. But wasn't that also a kind of a thing before? You had some industries who were better in a good shape or in a better shape, and some who had really crisis. I'm challenging a bit the word of the new normal and what should be new in that normal.
As we shift gears, I think already, and we continue, I think, let's continue immediately, I think, and talk a little bit about that new or next or accelerated normal. I think we are, frankly speaking, not sure either. We would think of it more as an accelerated, I think, normal. And maybe the word normal is not even a good word, because normal, I think, suggests somehow that we will reach a certain stable state again, instead of it is a dynamic environment and things are just changing all the time. This has been, of course, more of a fundamental disruption. So I think a certain, stability, where less, change is probably expected than in this year, is maybe the word, normal, what we mean with it. But when we think about it, and let me just quickly present one slide, with some trends, which we see. And of course, this is very much crystal ball reading. And I do not postulate any, completeness, in this chart with regard to the overall trends. But what we see is basically 3 areas where things are changing, which have been changing before already. I think there is the whole area around working world and organization, which before, I think, around the word of future of work, of course, was already around. I think there are changes around culture and leadership, which we have been seeing also, I think, before COVID-19. And then there are changes for personnel and HR, I think, in itself. Let me go one by one, I think, through them. I think on the working world, of course, that's what we are doing right now in the virtualization of collaboration, remote working, mobile working is becoming a reality, has been a reality, but has been accelerated massively, I think, through COVID-19. And I think nobody expects that it will be fully scaled back again, but that will be a pendulum, and I think the pendulum will be interesting where it actually ends. There is exactly this kind of experimentation spirit through also the crisis management. Many people have been, I think, made, I think, experiences in sort of agility, not with regard to the strict Scrum methodology, but more the spirit of being fast, failing fast, learning fast, iterative experimentation, I think, which we also believe will be here to stay, just also because of digital attackers, which have been around before. And the whole digital transformation, I think, has been, just like once more accelerated. And I think after a health crisis, I think we expect that health, which has been more an administrative function before, is becoming much more strategic. And I think that employees will expect, I think, companies to care for their health in, I think, a certain manner, less just like law, which you have to fulfill, but more as maybe a strategic lever which you can pull in HR. And on the culture HR side, the most difficult question to answer, I think, is will we see permanent changes, I think, in values among employees and customers? That's, of course, is exactly also the question around when will airlines recover? Will people continue to travel internationally? Will they continue, I think, to put sustainability, I think, maybe prioritize that more than before? Will we see a certain behavior of no consumption? Will we see more solidarity? So all kind of these values which we have seen in the crisis, will they be here to stay, or will they just like go away? Because often we have seen after crisis, I think 2-3 years ago, lots of the things which I think people forecast to stay just like went away afterwards as well. And then there has been purpose. Purpose has been a trend, I think, before, but we've seen companies coming out of this crisis better when they had a strong sort of purpose, which employees could identify with, could rally around. I think also because of remote working and virtual distancing, I think some kind of idealistic unity is something which helps in such situations. And then finally, of course, we had already this question for leadership. There are massive new leadership requirements through mobile working, through digital working, through the uncertainty, I think, which leaders need to manage. And the whole topic of ambidextrosity, I think, is one which is pretty clear to all of us. And then for personnel and HR, there is, of course, large digital qualification initiative, also really reskilling and upskilling due to, for example, replacement of channels, new technology, I think just like different business models which had to be invented and will be, I think, further being invented. Flexibilization has been a value. Suddenly, again, I think we have almost forgotten, I think, in the 10, I think, positive years from 2009 onwards, that it does not always go up, but it can always go also down drastically. And then finally, we have seen that the digitization of HR processes, of course, had to be, I think, accelerated as well. And not a new trend, but I think something which is at large scale now possible or thinkable, which has been more, I think, some small IT-related, I think, things in the past. So a couple of trends, and my question, I think, to you, but also to the participants would be, this is not a complete list. And of course, I think the question to me would be, to you. What are your top 3 out of this list? And of course, interesting as well, do you see that one is really missing, which bothers you more than all of these 9, I think, currently? Hans, would you like to go first?
Yes, of course. When I look at these topics, my story would be starting from the top right. Acceleration of organization agility is key. Not because of the crisis or the situation per se, but because of digitalization, customer needs, customer behavior. You really need to adapt much faster to the changing requirements. And then when I go to the left, I'd say you definitely need additional leadership requirements at large, because you can't accelerate your organizational agility without that leadership style and changing leadership skills. And when I come to the lower right, I'd say, and to make it full, the picture, you need also large-scale qualification initiatives to try and to bring the full organization to the next level and to skill up all the people. Of course, there are many aspects here on the slide which are important as well, but my story would go this way.
Thank you. Carolyn, which would you pick? I think you are muted right now, Carolyn.
Yes, I am. Sorry, because there was noise. I didn't know if it was me. Okay, so I like the slide a lot. I think it's really comprehensive, and I actually think I'm going to use this, so thanks. But I think I have a heavy lean on box 2. I think 1 and 3 for me, of course, they're important, and of course, this whole work from home and all that in the future is critically important. But for me, I'd see that more as hygiene, but super important hygiene. For me, if I was to say where we need to put the focus, at least where I'm sitting, is around, I don't know if it's leadership or values. To me, it's what we have seen in this crisis is that the need for compassion in the workplace, this need for love in the workplace, for caring about one another has really been needed, because the mental well-being of everybody had to be taken care of before they could get on the production line and do what they needed to do to create a drug substance. So for me, I think that has really surfaced, and what I would love us to see is, to really understand the values of the company. We have them and they're good, but really, we know how communities work well, we know how families work well, and it's usually around this joy, love, compassion. And why doesn't a company have that as well? Because we've seen in the crisis that was needed in order to make people feel wholesome, and having that moment of pause to just check in, because maybe we were confronted with it because we were in each other's houses. But I just wonder if that is an area we need to do a little bit more research on when we get a little bit more back to whatever it is, and just to say, let's hold on to that and see how that drives our business forward, because it was good for business then, it will most definitely be good for us moving forward. So I would say it's the culture leadership side.
Thank you. Yeah. Love and joy, I think, very important, especially in these times. Christina.
Right, now the slide is gone, so I have to rely on my memory.
Maybe Leonie, I think we can show it again if you want to.
It's okay.
That was a test.
Okay, great. Okay, see if I pass it. No, I'm with both of you. I'm with Hans that I think that agility and flexibility are going to be even more important, and it's not going to be so easy to just carry it across after the crisis, but we will have to find a way. And that is closely connected to the cultural bubble, I think, that you were referring to, Caroline. It's really interesting to hear you talking about joy. No, I can relate to that very much. To laugh, I have to, that's unusual words in a business environment, but I understand what you mean, and I think that for us that will be also an issue. We have to work on our culture, because it's going to be a tough time going through this crisis, and we have to see and find find out how we can keep that Swiss spirit that we have, and we definitely, like Hans said, will need leadership for that. Whatever leadership means in that in the future, if it's confined to a small group of people or if it's something that encompasses everybody, probably also in the organization. So yeah, that would be my focal points.
All right. Thank you. Then let's have a look, I think, and what the participants, I think, also what you rated, all of you, I think, and I think we have a Mentimeter survey ready. Let's see what it shows us, I think, with regard to results. Not everybody has voted, 20 altogether. So it's additional leadership requirements, it's workforce flexibilization, and I think then we have, I think, with virtualization of collaboration and acceleration of organizational agility, 2, I think, thirds. And if it's okay with you, I would say we start with leadership and then talk a little bit around workforce flexibilization, which I think, Christina, you mentioned, I think, as well. And then we maybe take the agility, I think, as a third, because I think all of you mentioned it. And so we make a good, I think, crossing of what you, I think, said and what the participants, I think, rated. Now, leadership, of course, I think there are very clear things, and we have enabled, I think, leaders, at our clients with regard to remote working, with regard to uncertainty, with regard to resilience and stuff like that. But what would you say? What are the kind of new leadership requirements? What do leaders have? I think, what kind of new tasks do they have currently? Which you observe in the daily, I think, practice, also from your personal experience with your, I think, executives.
Let me maybe start, and I thank you for your reaction, Christina, because I think I use the word love a little bit tongue-in-cheek, as we say in England. It's a little bit provocative, but it's making the point, and I think, and I'm going to say the answer to your question is love. We lost Christina. Oh no. I can't see her.
I think we lost Christina, but I think Christina is going to come again.
Okay, I'll carry on. Sorry, got distracted. Because I think love is a jarring word in the corporate sense, and that's part of the reason why I use it. Because I can't admit her. There we go. We've admitted her back in. Good, she's back. No, and I think if you look about in the family environment, I'll use my children as an analogy. Welcome back.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
We missed you. So if I think of my children, when I speak to my children about anything, you clearly you love them, and then you give your kids pretty tough feedback. You're right, come on, dress differently or do your homework. And there's none of this dancing around the issue with your kids, right? You're pretty direct because you love them and you want them to thrive, and you know they can be their best selves if you give them a little bit of coaching around the edges. And that's my point, is why is it different in the workplace? If we love our colleagues, and I use it provocatively, but if we really care about them, we'd give them that feedback to help them thrive. And if we all thrive, businesses grow and we have joy at work. So I use the word, as I say, as a little bit jarring, just to get the sentiment over, because people tend to react. I'm also thoughtful about not overusing the word, because I appreciate we're all in an environment where you have to land as an executive. You can't be out there being a little bit crazy. But I think I use it to just say, in our communities and our family, it works. It's what it's what makes us whole. And why is that different in the workplace? So to answer the question, I would say to really interpret that into business language and bring that into the workforce. I think there is so much that will be unleashed with that.
Mm-hmm. What I found very interesting, Carolyn, is that you used the word coaching, but you describe what you do with your children. I would say, I'm not quite sure if, just like by definition, this is coaching.
I'm not sure they would describe it as coaching either.
That's not very fair, Jens.
But sometimes you need to tell people what to do, and sometimes you need to coach them. And I think that's maybe also present in the workplace.
But I think this is very important, because if you have like a kind of a positive relationship and you care for the other person and there is trust, between you, you can change from the kind of coaching mode to the very directive assertion mode from, I think, saying like, let's not bullshit now. This is 1, 2, 3 versus, I think, an open-ended, I think, question helping the other really come up with sort of, her own, I think, interpretation. So I think it is an interesting, I think, observation, which I give on to both of you. I think Christina, Hans, also new leadership requirements.
If I might add and build trust on the coaching, and I just had a chat with Maya Weber, who sends you all the best, Christina.
Thank you.
Because she is a famous and very professional coach, which is a nice bridge. I think coaching is very important also which means it's a signal that you're ready and prepared to work on yourself and your strengths and how you and everybody can develop. I'd say when it comes to leadership challenges, in my view, the utmost is to establish a leadership style built on trust, because so many people have now seen during these changes and home office phases that they just were not building on trust. They were building on, I need to see where people are and what they are doing.
Yeah.
So they were building on control, and for me, this will be an accelerator in the near future, that pure and real leaders and successful leaders are those who are able to build trust in their teams, and they are building on trust when working with people and pushing their talents according to their strength. And as I said, trust that these people will do the best for customers and their peers.
I can completely, or I do completely agree, because my word would have also been trust. I think trust is one of the most important qualities you need to bring out in the team and within leaders. So I completely agree. Also, I think, Caroline, like you said, it's very, very important that usually leadership only works if you care for the people you work with. Otherwise, it's just not effective. But then maybe let me add one more element. I think also something that has developed, at least over the last year in our company, is a great many people working a lot more independent than they have been before. So they make their own decisions. It's a bit in line with the trust topic, but they organize themselves. They come to decisions themselves. Decisions are not only made at the top. So it's dealing with this independence of each individual or team.
Right.
That's something we have to learn.
Which is something which we always experience with an agile transformation as a leadership trait, which sometimes is difficult to develop, this letting go on the one side of control, but on the other side, being close and getting rid of impediments and really helping the team on the other side, because just letting go is not the only answer, I think, with regard to independent self-organization, I think, in these transformations. And so maybe there is a link, of course, from leadership to organizational agility. And if you take this discussion around organizational agility, I think, what is it that you would say after these crisis experience of the last 9 months? And of course, I think most companies went through some kind of agile transformations already, or they're in the middle of it, I think, with different philosophies and different, I think, experiments in, IT or marketing or sales or whatever, I think, wherever you stand with regard to it. What is it that needs to happen going forward to build on the spirit of the last 9 months and become even better in, I think, dealing with uncertainty and changes?
I think when I might jump in, I'm really wondering, when I'm going on holidays, and after some days, I'm telling myself, when I go back to work, to the office, I will definitely sleep more. I will definitely do more sports. I will definitely eat healthier stuff. And
good intentions.
After 2 weeks, most of that is gone. And so I'm really wondering, because we are middle of that scenario now, where we think once this scenario is over, we take all the good purposes with us. And I already observed that after the first wave, various companies were taking their people back because it was nevertheless better to have control than trust. And many companies really were fast in adapting to the old world after the first wave. And I think the key would be to really have the strength and to build on the experiences which have been taken out of that phase and take, as you said, in that very negative phase and also stressful phase, all the positive points out for the next period after COVID, if there is a time after COVID.
Yeah, I want to support that. I think I'm not a big believer in huge cultural programs that are spread across the company, and usually they don't, or in my experience, they have never brought what the people who initiated them intended. So actually, I think it's building on experience is a very good way of putting it, and I think we just have to carry on. We just have to do it. Working across departments whenever it's needed, focusing on the target and on the goal and not on departmental borders. We just have to do it. And as HR, provide an environment where that's possible and where it's not hindered by, I don't know, too strict role descriptions, or probably we have to look into our remuneration systems. So there's a couple of things we can do to help that, but we just have to do it.
And I think practically one thing that's on everybody's mind, and maybe you're ahead of us, but in terms of the work from home or remote working policy, I mean, it's a very practical part of our jobs, but what is it moving forward? And I think, a lot of companies have come out and made big statements, and we'll see how that goes. And I think we're just watching a little bit because we don't believe we have enough data and science around this working from home. What are the effects and what is the right model? Is it okay from moving forward everybody to work wherever they want, assuming tax regulations are met, etc.? Or is it there is a healthier model for the work and for home that's 30% in the office or 60%? So I think practically speaking, one of the things I want us to do is create a remote working policy, if we feel we need one, that's based on some data and not just what we think people want, because I'm very nervous about not actually knowing the repercussions of what's really been happening the last year. So that would be one thing. And I think the last thing I'd add to that is I have a really high appreciation of other parts of HR that maybe I didn't in my previous life, because the area for us of mobility, the global mobility department is quite small. It's only a few people, but what they have had to do in this last 9 months is seismic, because we had people around the world, some in China wanted to come back. We're growing in China, so we need people over there. How do we safely get them over there? We have humans with families right at the center of this, and we have a very small department just trying to solve these problems. So I guess for me, it's also an awareness of the strategic drivers in HR actually shifted in the last couple of months.
Yeah. I mean, when you say building on experience, and I think, Christina, you mentioned kind of cross-functional collaboration or this target orientation, I think, getting out. But I think let's pick up maybe in the last minutes also on the topic of flexibility, because I wonder, there is, of course, I think on the one side, what we discussed around culture and this loving and caring for, I think, employees, sometimes could be interpreted as almost like the opposition, I think, of flexibility, where I think, in all times, flexibility was also the flexibility, of course, to dismiss, I think, part of your workforce in a kind of, downturn situation through temp labor, through flexible working contracts and so on, or at least through flexible conditions, I think, of I think so. Flexibility has not only, I think, the connotation of agility in, I think, catering to, I think, adapting to new circumstances, but of course also hard consequences with regard to workforce cost. Do you think that coming out of COVID-19, I think that this I think economical value of flexibility will be something which you as HR need to, I think, manage differently than before?
I think what I've seen as a practice, it's not answering the question head on, but it's this co-creation. Because if you want to be agile, I mean, there's people out there better than me know about all this agile, process of scrums and whatnot. You just need to co-create. You just need to get everybody involved, and it's not always possible, but actually it's faster. And I think, for me at least, when we're looking at new models, I would just most definitely not do it in any form of isolation. It would be fully engaging the right level of stakeholder as quickly as possible and learning. And it's that respect for their opinion and then co-creating. That's been my thing.
I think when I might just build on that, what you're saying, of course you need specific skills, but as you mentioned, are there some topics missing on the chart? Maybe it's integrated in that one, but of course HR and line management together have to establish a kind of a workforce management and a strategic workforce planning based on key critical skills. Now I can say key critical skills for the near future, because skills development is such a fast moving target. Skills are so moving and dramatically changing in this digitalization. And then I fear everybody at the table, like Caroline and Christina, they all fight for the same people we want to have at Swisscom. And therefore, you need to have a good plan. What comes in the near future? You have the demographic changes, and we probably will all run after the same talent. I'm almost sure about that.
I would say maybe let's shift once more, I think, to the final question, kind of, how must HR and the CHRO change in this, as we said, new or accelerated, I think, a normal. And wanted to ask you all also, I think, you participants, I think, with which, I think, 3 hashtags, would you describe the role of the CHRO you would like to see in the future? We post this question also to all of you, but who would like to go first? Carolyn, you're already laughing, so I pick you.
Well, I'm laughing because you know what my first one's going to be. It's hashtag love. Of course it is. Hashtag love. No, that is first and foremost, and I think I've tried to explain what I mean by that. It's a jarring word, but I really want to get the sentiment of caring about what people have to say. So the first one would be love. The second one would be experimentation. We talked a little bit about that, but it's fun in the job, but it also drives to, great results. And we're in this real agile world where you just have to keep iterating. So the second one would be hashtag, forgot we're just said now. And the third one will be co-create. So there you go. It would be love, experimentation, and co-create.
All right. Great words. Great hashtags. Who goes next?
I can go next. I would very much go also for hashtags experimentation. And I would add 2 hashtags that I think need to go together. One is called hashtag data and the other is called hashtag people. Because you can't have one without the other.
Data. Yeah, we need to talk about that in a second. Hans.
That's nice, Christina. I would also have said something like that. Analytics data is one of the hashtags I have in mind as well. The second one and it's specifically for HR, I think I would bring in a hashtag business. HR needs to have a strong business acumen and strong business focus. And the third probably is culture. Culture and transformation is one of the biggest tasks. It's kind of the golden nugget we are not only it's not only an HR task, but we are about to orchestrate. We have the role to constantly push on culture and transformation in these coming years, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So I think it's an interesting question. So I think we asked you participants as well. I think it probably takes a little bit longer, I think, to look at the results. So before we look at the results, we have a question which fits perfectly into this. Which skill set does the HR employee of the future need if she or he would like to live up to that role? So what are the skills which we have to develop in the sense of HR for HR?
Huh. I don't believe that there is a general answer to that. Because HR is such a broad field. I think, I don't know, if I look at my team and also other teams that I know, I think one important thing is that we need to be even better consultants, close to the business, understanding the business, understanding their needs, and helping them advance in their way. That's one thing, like a big generalist kind of thing. But at the same time, I think that specialized knowledge gets more and more important. I'm just looking into what Caroline said. Cross-border social security issues, moving people around the world. It gets so complicated, and that's not the only field. So I think we need that on the other end as well. And I think what all of these people need, and what we have, at least we haven't been working with enough so far, is sort of base it all on a more data-driven approach without losing the love and the people.
I can just agree on that, because starting with the data, HR analytics will be key for the success of not only the HR department, but also for the company. So HR people need to learn how you use data for business needs, and we need more people who have these kinds of talent. Goes closely to the line. We need also to have people in HR who are strong in IT and processes, end-to-end process design and automation, which we already had on the chart. And again, I bring in the business understanding, because I have so often seen that HR people are saying, and I know then people won't like me when I say that, but I nevertheless say it. So many HR teams tell me, you know, line managers are my clients. And I'm always saying, no, these are not our clients. Our clients are those people who pay the bills for Swisscom. We have one client in a company, and then we are a team to do the best HR, line management, finance, communication, and everybody to fulfill the beliefs and the needs of the clients. And I always seen that this client understanding within an organization gears to kind of a misbehavior which I don't like.
There's a question which I like, because I think we always talk about the data or the more fact-based approach or HR analytics, that how do you change the mindset? How do you build these data and I think analytical skills within HR?
Can I just bring in one point, because this is very important. When we talk about data, it's also about privacy and how you handle the privacy aspect of all the employees. So you have to first also care about how do you work with data? What are your principles? And we did this also together with the unions, because also unions and employees need to trust you, totally trust you on what you're doing with data to prevent that Big Brother is watching you. This is not the intention. We want to work with data to be a better performer in business and to fulfill client needs, and not to observe our employees. This is very important to me.
What else do you do already, I think, to build these data and analytical skills Are there any, I think, good lessons learned which you can share with, I think, our listeners, watchers?
I have some examples. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Hans.
I have some examples of what we did. You have to start somewhere. I told you where we started to talk with unions, to have some workshops to establish a clear understanding what we do and what we don't do. And then we have some examples, for example, when you go into training and to try to find out which trainings are really successful for our people, which trainings you can really see that maybe you can increase net present value and net promoter score, sorry, the satisfaction of the clients. Do you see a direct link to trainings and client satisfactions? And we did some tests. We are not very far in this, but I think HR has to come up with more quantitative facts to show that what they are doing is helping to improve, to fulfill the customer needs.
Carolyn, you wanted to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, it's more of a status update where Lonza is. I don't think in HR we are particularly data-driven today, despite our business being very data-driven, right? So we're a bit of a paradox. We're a science company. We're a production. So there's so many things that you need there that we should actually mirror in the function, and I think we fall short. But I think a lot of it comes down to investment. I think Workday or a similar tool that you have, it can do some pretty funky stuff, right? And I think one of the questions one of the watchers had was, how do we upskill? Well, actually, we have tools that most of us do at our fingertips if we've invested that actually give you what you need. So you don't need to become a data expert, at least in some places, but you need to be able to have access to that data. So you need to have invested in the tool, which is not always easy. And then when you have it, you just have to drive a discipline of using that data. And when you're in a conversation with business leaders, you are using that data all time, real time, to back up why you're arguing certain things and just making everything as data driven as possible. But that's more of a aspiration than a reality, at least in my world. But I do think we have tools out there today that can provide us with that simplicity if the organization wants to invest in data.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think, but I also think that in order that these data are sort of valid, you need to have good data input. That's also one of the problems we are facing. And I mean, Swiss is, if I look at the whole company, like the Lufthansa Group company, we're kind of like, with our size, which is like a mid-size in the group, we're quite good with our data quality, but still, I don't think it's enough. We still, it's already counting FTEs is the challenge sometimes, right? And you'd think that's easy. So I think data quality and also knowing what to do with the data. I mean, I'm saying we have to be more data driven, but I have to admit that also I am not at a point where I could say, right, I need this, and this will help the business in that way. I think we need to, that's coming back to the experiments. We need to try things and test things and see how it works, and then evolve from that.
Mm-hmm. We talked about new role. We talked about the skills which I think are required for that new role. I want to check, like with you, Carolyn, also one more, I think, question which I had about love and joy. I think, how do you treat people, or how do you teach people love and joy in the, I think, not just HR function? What can you do to bring this mindset? Historically, I remember that HR was already, was at some point of time, people rather had that image of HR as these good menschen, who think only about the good in the person and so on and so on. And then we talked about tough data, economics, and business acumen and so on. Now I think maybe there is a bit of love and joy lost, I think. And how do we bring it back into the function?
And I think you highlight it well, it's an over-indexing. So, clearly I wouldn't be in my position if I was just about love and joy, because there are difficult things on the path to these jobs that you just have to do and stand behind. And I over-index it because I think it's a desert. So I think, your question was, how do you bring it in? I think part of it is very much, spreading it, right? Whatever role model, be the change you want to see in the world, right? So I'm not saying they're the words. I do not want my HR team to start using those words if it doesn't sit with them. I'm not saying this is how it is at Lonza. Don't misunderstand it. It's just a deep value belief of mine that if you spread gratitude and you care about people, businesses thrive. So I think, to answer your question, I think it's to do it. If it's something that is your lean, if that's who you are, lean into it and show gratitude and compassion daily and have a practice around it. Not everybody has a practice around it, but for, every human can develop that if it's important to them. So I would just say role model and see how it starts to fit. You'd be surprised if you push on doors how many of them open.
Very good. Role modeling is it. Then let's have a look, I think, at what I think our dear, observers, watchers, participants have actually said, I think, and we see, I think, data is in the middle, co-create, agility, culture, but also beyond boundaries. I like that a lot, I think. Instead of cross-functional collaboration, I think beyond boundaries is, I think, one which is much more inspiring. And of course, there are a couple of other ones from people and business partner, inclusive talents, a lot of good words, which I think we put together, I think, later also after the 5 series as a bit of a documentation to, I think, just like collect these inputs.
Jens, may I also react on the love part, because I think, although I'm fully aware of what I've said about business and business acumen, I think it's important that HR remains in the role for being responsible also for engagement, for inspiration, for motivation, for helping talent to grow. I just think this is a key of our role, and was and will always be the key of our role. Nevertheless, and that's why I'm putting so much emphasis on the other aspects, we should not forget that we are part of the business, and therefore I think it's important to find the right balance, because HR is always attracting people who love to work with love and with inspiration and have their heart on the right place, and then we have to bring a lot into their ability to stay close to the business.
Right, absolutely. There is one interesting question is always when you have discussions around new roles or about adapted roles, or like, from an HR perspective, and you have a reorganization, you talk about new roles and so on, and you have the same people filling these new roles. Then of course the question is always like, well, not only what is changing on the positive side, but what will you let go? Because usually fulfilling a new role also requires letting go of old habits, which might be standing in your way. So is there anything which you would recommend and advise your colleagues, I think, to let go with regard to old role habits? And which you put yourself into this list of good intentions, which we talked about before, when you are under the Christmas tree and you think about 2021, you put on, on your list the one things which you want to do and the 2 or 3 things which you do not want to do anymore in the next year. What would I be reading on that right-hand side of that list of paper?
I think mine would be very much, and it's something you grow into, and we've been forced into, is it's okay not to know. It really is just fine not to know. And I don't have any shame in saying to my CEO, who asked me a question last week, I went, I have no idea, but I think I can find out for you if you give me 2 weeks. And I said to him, is that okay with you, or do you expect me to know? And he laughed and said, of course not. So I think it's that letting go. When we move into a new role, it's important, but in these times, it's normal not to know. And if you do know, you're probably making it up, because we just don't know. So that would be mine.
Any additions from you, Hans or Christina?
Yeah, we did over the past few years, we also try to establish a mindset of agility within the HR team. And one of the key aspects of agility is also to prioritize. Prioritization means to say yes and no, to stay focused on certain topics and to say no to others. And HR was always in a kind of mindset, we do everything. There is no in HR. And if I had that wish for the Christmas tree, I'd say it should, as it is in IT, it should also in HR be just normal to prioritize and to say, okay, then with these resources, we do this and that, and we don't do this and that. And really also to have the courage to say no to certain things.
Yeah. Christina, you're still muted.
You're muted.
Okay.
Now it's very good.
That kind of like really went with my or touched my heart, because it's having focus, having the courage to let go of certain topics, even though maybe some people in the organization won't like you that much anymore. I think that's a bit hard for us. It's hard for me, I have to admit. I like to be liked. It's much nicer. but we do have to focus, and I think that's one of the big problems, at least I have in my organization. And also, even though we were talking about data-driven companies and analytics, I think we have to let go of the belief that at least in the next couple of years, tools will make the work for us. Tools will find out who is the person best suited to job X, Y, Z. Tools will help us to find solutions to problems. I don't think that we are quite there yet, and I'm not sure when we will be.
That's such a good point, which I might want to add on that, because tools are important and HR analytics are important, and process digitalization is important. To free up time for all these situations, you need to have people at the table. You need to care about the people. And we should focus our skills in our teams to have a perfect end-to-end automation for, let's say, the 75% of just grand normal. And to focus on the 25% which are exceptional and which need seniority and people and emotions. That's where HR needs to jump in.
This is a perfect closing statement, Hans. So thank you very much. Thank all of you, Christina, Carolyn, and Hans, very much for your time. I think it has been a very good discussion. You participants, you will receive, I think, the results, of these surveys, and feel free really to contact any, of us, but probably also, you three, if I might talk to you, for you, if you have additional questions. There will be one final, round, which we will do in January with BP Europe, with Group Deutsche Börse, and with Heidelberg Cement. So again, three very different, CHROs and companies. Follow us, on updates on LinkedIn. But I would say for today, thank you very much. Have a nice afternoon, and as it is never too early, to wish have also happy holidays. That's it from my side. So thank you.
Holidays to everybody.
Bye, everybody.